for the sake of our community, it is necessary to consider the exposure that loud stages with music celebrating this type of lifestyle does within our community. It's exposing everyone in our church to things that we don't believe in. We don't think is an appropriate way of living.
I'd like to ask, does the number of people make a difference necessarily? And also to point out that those that put on the festival live within the community.
I'm sure from you guys that we don't have a repeat of last year. That was just a particularly dangerous situation that we believe that you guys instigated. That given your past behavior, we can't accept a similar pattern from last year. So we want to see some kind of proposal from you that ensures that any kind of protest that you propose is done in a safe manner, in line with the current guidelines that the town has passed.
I think there's no run in this discussion for talking about violence, and that's certainly in our interests, and we've discussed this previously, that's central.
Talking about actually look at a map and where we want to be, ideally, how we want to conduct ourselves.
Well, if the event is occurring, I think we had discussed right here.
The main stage?
on the main stage.
So you actually meant front and center, literally. Okay.
Do you see how that might prevent the equal opportunity for them to express their own voices if you take their main stage?
Well, I mean, they certainly have other, we wouldn't actually be occupying all that much room for the entire, festival area.
You right in the middle. So we do need some sort of buffer between the festival and protest. That the line of volunteers was a total failure. I don't think we can accept that again. So we need some sort of physical space between the festival and the protest.
Well, we're at this point where we're discussing real estate, right, and inclusion. What sort of barriers might be necessary? I guess I'm wondering, does there need to be a protest? Could there be a way in which Salvation Now's voice is heard in, or perhaps both voices are heard in a less combative way?
I'm a bit confused because we have, bands performing, dance troops on the stage, sports and games, some vendors, like the general street fair type fun. So I'm not really sure what alternative.
Quality of freedom of speech.
And having my children exposed to that sort of lifestyle masquerading around in fun, I don't think that's what we want to do.
Within a closed site, no one is forcing you to enter with your children. So I'm just a little bit confused, and perhaps you could explain a little bit more how you see this as a major issue of exposure, as you say, when you have every right not to participate.
You indicated that the city understands that they were the ones who instigated the violence last time. So even if we give them rules about how they are to act on site or where they are to stay on site, clearly they're not rational in this situation right now. And you can see how much emotion is behind their position. And so it worries me that even if they are on site, that with rules put in place, that they're not going to abide by those.
Step outside their boundary, they start using megaphones, they start causing disturbance. We do have a police presence, and we will be prepared to enforce our rules and enforce our agreement.
Does each entrance need to have equal weight? Just a thought or a question.
I feel like, I spent a few nights in jail, and that did not feel good. But I also understand that, my forefathers have, some people are martyrs for what they believe in, and that's, I think it's okay to experience that, but I do feel like it's one-sided.
I hear this idea of free speech coming up a lot on both sides, right? Both sides want to be able to express themselves to the fullest ability. Chris made the suggestion of having a separate event for your group. You guys were not so interested in that, even though two separate events, one would assume that they could be of equal size, of equal scope, would be relatively fair. So what I'm hearing you say is that rather, you're more interested in expressing your freedom of speech at the same time as they are. Correct? So, last year, this was in, the manner was in a form of protest. Is it possible that two people expressing freedom of speech at the same time could be, instead of protest, a dialogue?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would like you to maybe brainstorm ideas that could be the way that we approach this.
I mean, I think maybe just
Executing on it.
yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. So maybe something like some space within this area, and then maybe one of the events could be a kind of dialogue between both sides on the main stage about this issue. One potential.
Perhaps an interfaith dialogue where we have multiple, not just two perspectives, but 3 or 4.
How would you?
I'd have to think about that.
You know, we were thinking about the beginning of our discussion where we went through and we were talking about our values, and clearly there are some different interpretations here, but something that really came through for all of us was this issue of nonviolence, and we were wondering if it might be possible to include your groups in some type of dialogue activity, be that through artistic expression or some type of thing about a theme, a shared value such as nonviolence, as opposed to the issues that we disagree on or that polarize us to the extent that it can lead to escalating.
Again, I as long as we're at the table, not reducing our restrictions, I'm not opposed to things necessarily. So, if that doesn't, I don't know. But it's hard for me to make these statements because it's I have a large congregation that is invested in protecting their community. So I don't know what to say about that.
Can I answer this? Can you draw what you mean by that?
Well, sure. What if, instead of having the vendors, right now you can only access the vendors through the second entrance.
Right.
So what if we had vendors this way? I don't know. That way both entrances, there'll just be more flow of people across the entire space.
Is that the main stage?
This is the main stage. I'm not fixed to any of this, but the idea was how do we get more traffic flow around the vendors?
I think that we could get on board with that.
Yeah. One thing that we could do to create more space is actually get rid of the family fun zone, because we don't want to promote that sort of activity among children.
What sort of activity?
Oh, just I think it shouldn't be.
Well, so there will be little kids or older kids, and rather than having them run around the festival grounds and their parents are yelling at us, we want to make sure parents know where to.
Can we maybe perhaps create a family fun zone that is a neutral ground that doesn't focus on the values perhaps of either party, and so that way children will be in this space without the influence of the ideals of OutFest, but then
I'm curious as to what you mean about a neutral space. The family fun zone is an area where kids are playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an area where we are lecturing children about what we think families should look like, because we think that families can
look like all kinds of things. So I'm just curious what you mean by a neutral zone, more about how you would distinguish that from the zone that currently exists, because for kids playing, that's a pretty neutral activity already.
I think we're worried largely about children being exposed to gay propaganda.
Try to cause a disturbance, we will simply, make our voices heard. But
If we don't come to an agreement today, my client will certainly show up in full force and be occupying space both inside and outside of the venue.
And that disruption that we had last year, I can guarantee you that will not happen again, so we won't, if you try and cause a disturbance,
We
to get
won't-
coverage that way.
we will, if what we're discussing right now is not too restrictive, I'm okay with it. But I am hearing things go in the opposite direction, and if that's the case, then I cannot agree.